Join Dr. Sharon Anderson, CEO of KCG Consulting Services, LLC, and author of the upcoming book, Emotional Civility, The New Standard for Global Success, and an expert panel of global experts and thought leaders on the issue of world civility. Ambassador Dr. Clyde Rivers, Dr. Sonia Robinson, Dr. Rebecca Harper, and Dr. Patrick Busingay, as they tackle the question, are we facing civil war? Let's talk. Dr. Anderson and her guests will remind us that civility is not a tactic or a sentiment. It is the determined choice of trust over cynicism, of community over chaos. Join us live by way of YouTube.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, and welcome to KCG Consulting Services and our conference for this evening. Are we headed for civil war? Civility and justice for all does matter. Good afternoon. It's a town hall to address the fight for civil actions in America and worldwide. And I'm so excited to be here with you today. In light of America's ongoing political, economic, and social turmoil, as many people seek for peace and healing, I was encouraged by God to conduct this town hall and also to write a book entitled Emotional Civility, The New Standard for Global Success. My concern is whether or not we are headed for civil war. And when I talk about civility, I'm not just talking about civil discourse. I am really talking about whether or not, because of our failure to engage civilly with one another, whether or not we're actually headed towards war. And as a pastor, as a scholar, as a lawyer, as a business consultant, I am concerned that these issues must be conquered. And so tonight, I have a panel of experts in the field of civility to join me today to tackle that question and address the impact that civility has had worldwide, and hopefully empower all listeners with the tools that are needed to apply civility as a standard in our life. I'm so concerned that we have lost our way as it relates to civil discourse, and particularly in America over the last 4 years under the Trump administration, and what we've been fighting with in America, whether it's political issues, social justice issues, race issues. I believe that we're losing our way because we are not applying civility as a standard. And without going into a really deep historical dive, the Civil War, if we think about it, was caused by three main reasons in America, the Civil War in America: economic differences, interpretation of the Constitution, and moral beliefs. And because the North and the South in America were very different economically, the Civil War began primarily as a result of longstanding controversies over economics, and as we know, over the enslavement of Black people and what that meant to the economy. And so I believe this conference tonight and this discussion tonight is incredibly important, because we are living in a time where civility has vanished, and we are clashing in terms of the economy. We're clashing in terms of the Constitution, and we are clashing in terms of moral beliefs. So I believe that we must return to place at the forefront of our daily conduct the value of civil interaction that will ultimately bring success and peace and safety to our homes, our communities, and our nations. And so tonight, again, with my colleagues, we're going to provide pertinent information that will help all of us put faith into action and to remind us to honor each other and human dignity through civil conversation. So as we do that, let's bring in our guest and let's talk civility, civil speech, civil action, civil discourse. And so I have with me tonight Dr. Clyde Rivers, Dr. Sonia Robinson, Dr. Rebecca Harper, and Dr. Patrick Busingay. Good evening. Good evening, team. How are you?
Good evening. Great.
Great. So I'm so excited that you all are here with me. If I had to think of a better team to bring on to talk about these issues, I couldn't have thought about a better team to bring on, because all of you lead in your areas of civility, and it's really just exciting to have you with me tonight. So I want to start with Dr. Clyde Rivers. Sir, Dr. Clyde Rivers, Ambassador Clyde Rivers. Yes. The father of civility. That's what we call him, right? The father of civility. and I always have to give this testimony, Dr. Rivers. I would not be having this conversation. I would not have written this book without your encouragement and empowerment and prophetic voice over my life. And I am so thankful for you. And I'm thankful for you. I know everybody on this line and part of this discussion is thankful for you. And I really just don't have the words to express how grateful I am personally for God using you to speak in my life, because it has totally changed the trajectory of my life. What has occurred for me in 2020 would not have occurred but for you speaking what God spoke to you in 2019 about what I would be doing today. So welcome.
Wow,
welcome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Yes.
Man, with this, the panel you have here, Dr. Sonia, Dr. Harper,
Dream
Dr.
team.
Masinghe, come on, it gets no better.
Dream team. So let's talk civility. You have started this movement, as I would call it, civility for all, and you have touched so many people's lives and have really put the conversation about civility at a different level, not just in America, not just locally, but worldwide. So tell us why you did that, why God told you to do that, why it's so important, and how would you answer that question? Are we heading for civil war? Does this matter at all?
Yeah, first of all, that's a great question. I think the one thing that God showed me was that everyone he created has value. So if his creation is being minimized, then our world is missing out on contributions. See, I believe there's 7.8 billion people in the world, and they all have an answer for one of the 7.8 billion people. So because really people solve each other's problems. Mm-hmm. So I have a mandate from God to make sure his image in people is protected.
Yes.
And you asked me, do I think we're headed for a civil war? No, because, and I'll give you the reasons why. Mm-hmm. Every institution in 50 countries would have to break down. And I don't think the institutions are going to break down. I believe there'll be pockets of extremists mm-hmm. on like all sides that may have clashes. And I don't believe the institution, because I believe 80% of people can have a dialogue.
Yes.
10% on both sides cannot. Mm-hmm. And the actual media gives that 10% 90% of the time. Mm-hmm. So the image is bigger. For the image of that makes it bigger than it really is in the hearts of people. People are actually angry, and one of the big things is I believe we're having an actual ideological clash.
Yes,
I believe our civil war is over an old ideology and a new one coming up from the young kids. So they have another way of thinking, and the old wants to fight it. So I see that's a major part of where our clash will come.
Great. And that's good. We're going to come back to that, because I do agree. And my hope is that we are not headed towards civil war. And I think with people like you at the helm of the discourse of civility, it will not occur. And I do believe that ideological differences is really the root of the problem here, and definitely how media plays on that 10%, which does tend to fan the flame and fuel the fire of the discourse as opposed to solution. And so when we talk about media and the importance of communication, I could not think of a better person than the guru of communication, as we call her, Dr. Sonia Robinson, who I am so pleased to have met through you and have had the pleasure to be on her show. And it was like we knew each other for years. But I wanted to talk to you, Dr. Robinson, because what you have done is really made sure that in terms of media presence, that we're talking facts and we're talking positivity. And for me, and we'll talk about emotional stability in a minute, but for me, and even wanting to do this this conference and have this platform, we hear too much of the negativity. We hear too much about the problems, but we don't often hear about solutions. So talk to me about why you decided to actually start the show, because I heard your testimony and you didn't want to do it at first. And then why do you select the positive topics that you've selected, and how do you believe that has impacted and will impact our society in the space of stability?
Thank you, Dr. Anderson, for having me on your show today. I am grateful because I see this as a building block to get us to the next level of where we need to get to. I see this as repairing communication for positive change around the world. So I want to say thank you for that. And as you said, I use my gift, outpouring to the people of the world, to say, the world is not the way you see. Whatever picture they want to paint the picture like this is what it is. But this isn't the real world. The real world is what the people of God makes it. God has given us all gifts to share with the people. So no matter what we see on TV and what we hear on the news and what we see on Facebook, they want to make that seem like, well, this is what it is. But it's not, because that's someone's opinion. We all have opinions, but we need to be knowledge seekers and citizens and getting into what is actually reality.
Yes.
So we have the Bible as a starting point. And then we have all these other books that we could be reading to get additional knowledge. We don't have to believe what somebody tells us.
That's good.
I have an opinion, but does that mean that's right? No. You have an opinion. Does it mean that it's right? No. But what we need to be able to do is sit down and dialogue.
Yes.
And understand each other's differences. And that's not what we're doing today. And a good point of that is, I've watched, I think it was CNN I was watching the other day, and the commentator was interviewing the guy, and they asked him why he thought Trump won. He said he didn't know. I'm like, you're listening to everything that's being said instead of forming your own opinion.
Yes.
So my thing is, we can listen to each other, but please listen to each other's side of what we're thinking and what we mean. Just don't take what somebody says and say that that's gospel, because 9 times out of 10 it isn't. And the other thing that I'll say is, before you formulate an opinion based on what somebody said, like a CNN, you need to listen to all the other channels so you can get a broader perspective of what's going on.
That's a good point.
You may not like Fox. I don't like Fox, but I'll listen to it just to make sure I'm getting both sides of everything before I come out with an opinion. So that is why I'm, having the conversations that I'm having with my audiences. I'm picking the topics that I pick with my topics, because sometimes people don't know how to ask those questions to get to the right answers. So I'm trying to bring people to the platform that has the experience and the knowledge to answer those questions.
Awesome. And we appreciate you, and you do it well. And so what I get from that is that the civility, and these are not my words, but I'm going to own them today. Civility is not a tactic or a sentiment, right? It is determined. It is a determined choice of trust over cynicism, of community over chaos. Correct. And so the more informed that you are, the more information that you have so that you can make an informed decision, the less you will have chaos, and the more you will have a free discourse or a free platform of discussion and civil discourse, because we don't have to agree. We don't have to agree. And that's sort of the beauty of America. That's the beauty, God made us as unique individuals, right?
Right.
We're all different people with different giftings, with different talents. And we bring our experiences to bear. And so we have to be able to have a conversation and agree to disagree without being violent, without being coarse, without being, just uncivil, right? And that's why we promote civility, because it's the lack of civility that does lead to war. It's the lack of the ability to have a conversation where you don't agree that leads to the violence interruption. I mean, there's obviously more pieces to that, but lack of civil discourse is really the root of what leads us down that slippery slope. And so, Dr. Harper, you are the godmother now. We got the godfather of civility, we have the guru of communication, and then we have the godmother of family civility. And I welcome you from Canada. And I really do appreciate you being here. The work that you're doing around family civility is absolutely phenomenal, is absolutely groundbreaking and trailblazing. And when I say so much needed, again, words don't describe how much we need the work that you're doing, because the family is the foundation of everything that we do. What we pour into our children, what we allow to be poured into our children, what we want to, because the family and the wife and the husband represent, right, what God and his church, his bride, the family represents what God wants to see replicated on this earth. And so spending the time and the dedication that you've made to speak to families about civility, I believe is critical. So talk to the listeners and talk to us about why you even chose to focus on family civility, and talk to us about the importance of family civility as the foundation. Because if we can build that foundation at home, then when our children go out, when our wives go out, when our husbands go out, when our brothers and sisters go out to discourse in the community, they're doing it with a foundation of civility, right? And they're doing it with a foundation of inclusion. So talk to us about the importance of family civility and why you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. And I feel blessed and honored to be on this show. Let me define family civility. And I have two definitions. The family civility when it comes to the family itself, and then the family civility of how a nation should treat a family. So let's start with the family. Family civility is when family members accept and are civil to each other for their strengths and their individuality, not based on their birth order or cultural position, which is kind of powerful because, when we look at civility, a lot we hear about, and Dr. Rivers, I'm again the mentor, the godfather, he speaks about the golden rule, about do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you. Unfortunately, because we oppress even our own family members because they may be the youngest child, or they may be different and not fitting into the mold of what the family should be, we feel, and we're raising people who don't feel they're worth anything. So therefore they treat others how they feel they should be treated. And we have to start bringing up the confidence and the self-worth of our individuals. And it's done by saying, I value my member of my family because they bring a vibrant personality, and they bring love, and they bring this to this group, this household. And these are the strengths. And so when I teach family civility workers to go into the homes, the first thing we do is work on healing the family before we even start helping the family. And we have to heal. And what are we healing? Again, now that goes to family civility on a national or nation level, where when equity and family civility is when equity, support, and civility is shown to all families, no matter their race, no matter their gender, no matter their sexuality, different abilities, biologicalism, and formation. All families are accepted and given the equity they need to be empowered to do what they need to do to build a community. And why I say that is a lot of our families are from single parent homes. In fact, 65% of our families have changed.
Wow.
And we still do not show them the equity. We have children who are being raised not feel worthy because they come from a single parent home, or they've been adopted, or they're a foster child. Oh, we feel sorry for you. Let's show sympathy, not empathy.
Right.
This is where we have to change that. And you spoke about competition and the old and the new. When I was discussing the whole institute and who my competitors are the old system of charity, the old system of nonprofits saying, I'm here to save you, instead of saying, how can I help you to save yourself?
That's really good.
Yes.
And that is where we need to move. And that's what I train. The first class in family civility I teach is anti-oppressive and family civility approach.
Right.
And that is where we need to go. And we oppress each other, as I said, if we don't even value the youngest child in the family.
Absolutely.
And that's, you were alienated. I'm a youngest child by 7 and 8 years. So what I'm saying, I lived it. But I have certain advantages because I was able to observe the family. And then I ended up translating for everybody because I'm like, oh, that's not what my brother means. This is what he means. But that value of being the youngest and having to do certain things and being forced to do it because of your position, we have to break away and say, you know what? Rebecca has this talent. How can we utilize that strength so that we can all succeed in this household?
Absolutely. And that is one of the foundations, I believe, of even understanding what civility means, right? It is appreciating individuals for the gifts and talents and the knowledge and the perspectives that they bring. I do a lot of training and in a lot of different areas, and I just finished a training with the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services for their Credible Messenger program. And so these are individuals that have been previously incarcerated, and they come back and now they help the youth that are now incarcerated. And so I do emotional civility training, emotional intelligence training. See, Dr. Burton? And I do perspective taking, because again, oftentimes we come with one perspective, and if we try to force others to embrace our perspectives and we're not able or even willing to look at other people's perspective, then the clash comes. Then I don't understand, I won't understand, I can't understand, I refuse to understand. And there is that balance between empathy and sympathy that needs to be decided and determined and evaluated, because if you're overly empathetic, then your perspective is clouded. If you're overly sympathetic, then your perspective is clouded. And so there has to be a balance in that perspective taking process in order for, I believe, civil discourse to occur. Lack of perspective prevents civil discourse, right?
And as you say, with a family, we can experience the same exact day and have completely different memories. And it wasn't until I realized that in my social service work and all my training, I went, hold on, I have to accept my sister's truth of that day. I have to accept my brother's truth of that day, because it's their truth. And you have that fight. You're wrong. That's not what happened that day. That's not what happened. No, it is exactly what happened in their memory, because they are older. They have a different vision of it, where I was maybe younger and didn't have that knowledge, and that, there's so many things going on that we have to be accepting of people's truths, as Dr. Wood said. That's it. Thank you for that comment. So Dr. Busingye, tremendous world thought leader, the University of Greatness, celebrating other people's greatness, recognizing other people's gifts, and making that light shine throughout the world is just one of the things that you do so phenomenally, but is critical, in my view, in this conversation about civility.
because and in addition, I would like you to give some of your testimony, because just in reading about how you chose and coming from Uganda to really, I don't want to say disregard, but you took a problem and turned it into a promise. Amen. You took a problem and turned it into a promise, and now you are promoting greatness in other people. And you could have been bitter, you could have been angry, you could have lived in anger and bitterness and violence, but you made a choice, and now you are impacting people's lives all over the world. So talk to us about not only what you believe about the state of civility in the world, not just America, but in the world, and why you made that personal choice, because I'm sure it wasn't easy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Anderson, and all the great leaders with us and your great team at KCG Consulting. It's a great pleasure for me to be listening to the great minds, but at the same time thinking about what Sariva said. We might not be heading for civil war, but I still think that, yes, there might not be war physically out there, but the most destructive war is a war that takes place between the two ears. So it's a war in the mind. It's a war in the heart. And that's what affects the family we just talked about, Dr. Harper just told us about. The war happening in the family, in that individual seated on that dining table or seated on their bed having their meal, wherever they might be having their meal. And how that is communicated to the public, Dr. Robinson told us. We have news, then we have fake news, and then we have other news, and then we have good news. So there's too many types of news is out there. So some people make the choice to see at what is happening outside, and that control them. Or what we try to do at greatness, or what we've tried to do on my personal circumstances. Coming from Uganda, I remember one day we had just finished our dinner, and then that was in the night, and all of a sudden hearing bullets. So we had to run out with me, with my siblings and my parents, run out into the banana plantations, and that's where we spent the whole night. Why am I telling you this story? I'm saying that I grew up in a situation where there was physical war, but I would have let that war take me down. I would have gone through the violent route and picked up a gun or started to fight others or become a nuisance in the public or the community. But I did not let that war live in me. Why? Because I believe that my life was more than just that. I believe that I had that God-given purpose, of which I would be the culmination of my life. In other words, why am I living? What's the use for my life? Am I going to use my life just to do things which are not enhancing the community or distracting the community, or doing things that are enabling the community to celebrate who they are? So we could focus on the negatives happening in the community, on the war. We could focus on the negatives happening in the individual. And then I decided not to focus on that. I decided to focus on the positively already given gift that each one of us have. As a great Dr. Martin Luther King, he said, not everybody can be famous, but everyone can be great.
Yes, yes.
Because great is determined by serving.
It's really good.
So
Yes.
what we do is serving. What we do is helping others. Realize we highlight the great news about that person.
Yes.
We celebrate them through Greatness University, through the Greatness Awards, through the World Book of Greatness. We're highlighting the great news. In Christianity, we have the good news, we have the great news, we have the fake news, then we have the real news. We have the news. So we focus on the great news, and that's what we bring to the world. And that's my purpose for my Christian.
Amen. 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 And we are grateful. We are so grateful for that. So Dr. Rivers, and this is everybody now because we want to have an open discussion. So we have all of this competing information. We all are, as we've mentioned, experiencing personal, things, whether it's negative or positive. We have our own economic concerns that are tied to what we see as the political decision making. And now we're called to interact with one another in a way that either promotes civility or discourages civility. And I heard you say, Dr. Rivers, in a conversation that there is wisdom in connection. And that we have been so long in certainly America talking about diversity and inclusion, and I train on diversity and inclusion. But what we found now in this new era, that oftentimes when we start speaking about diversity, it now is almost promoting division as opposed to helping to assist in inclusion. And I'll just give an example, and then I'd love everybody to jump in and give their thought on this. Was doing a diversity and inclusion training for a Fortune 500 company. And what I found out was they didn't have a diversity issue. They didn't have an issue regarding gender. They didn't have an issue regarding race. What they had was an issue regarding tolerance of perspectives. And so when different staff members were expressing how they felt about different things, some of them didn't want to share, not because of a race issue, but because they were afraid of being condemned for their thought and their belief and what they felt about a situation, as opposed to them thinking that that was something that was rooted and grounded in racism. So I do believe in America we have a race issue, and this is not the discussion for today. But I think that as we're looking at how to tackle civility, that where we're missing the mark in a sense is we're not focusing on that tolerance of thought. And teaching people how to communicate in a way that allows people to have freedom of thought. So if I don't believe like you do, if I don't communicate like you do, if I don't express myself like you do, then we end up with a fight that then might have racial undertones, but we're not promoting the ability to have free discourse and free thought. So talk to us about inclusion versus diversity and how we begin to let everybody that's listening know that we really do need to work on tolerance of thought, because that's why we're seeing the fight in America right now, right? I believe one way, you believe another way, you believe he should be president, you believe he should be president, and the lack of tolerance for a different thought process is what is dividing us. And I want to hit that before we even get to race. We might not talk about race today because that's not our conversation. We're talking civility, y'all.
Yeah, let me give you what see the one thing that I believe has happened is the education institutions have educated people at times out of their mind into another mind. So if you think about it, how much of education really teaches you about you,
right?
You're always learning something else, and that tells you that it really, what it tells you is you aren't valid. You have to learn this and learn this, but if you never learn you, and one of the big things that I see is that kind of education, it actually retards your emotional development.
Wow.
And so what happens when you get smart? Okay, I'm smart. I got an A in the class. So now if you get an A in the class and you're talking to a person under you that may have an answer, you go to I'm smarter than you. So now all your emotion is invested in being right and not necessarily hearing truth.
Wow.
So I think one of the most things that the important things that we have to teach, and this is why when you talk about inclusion gives people the right to be different. Diversity says this group thinks like this, they walk like this. Well, that's untrue. There are people that may have had that experience, but not everyone. So diversity training at times it puts everybody in a category. But what if you're not in the category? So now you walk in and everyone's trained that you're in this category. But wait,
Right.
I'm not. I'm different. So I think what we need to do now with inclusion is I want to establish a concept that everyone's different. So let's base our finding on their uniqueness, not their conformity.
That's great. And the reason why that's just so wise and just so awesome. And I'm a lawyer, right? In law school, when you take the bar, you have to learn how to think like the people who wrote the questions on the bar exam.
Yeah.
If you try to come up with an argument that is inspired by your creativity, your evaluation of the facts. Now, ultimately, you get to do that once you pass the bar. But in order to pass the bar, now I have to think like an old white man, right? That wrote that bar exam. And it took me a minute, even in law school, to struggle I struggled because my creativity about how to approach an argument, which of course, once I graduated and took the bar, has landed me as a professor at Harvard. But as I was studying, I was pigeonholed into that thought process. And so when we're talking about, someone speaking over your life and prophecy, you spoke over my life to get me here and have this dialogue. But my spiritual mother has said for years that I was going to start my own law school. I'm about to cry because this brings us back to this thought, which is, and I would always say, well, why? How could I do that? What value would it have? But you just answered that question. The value of having a law school that focuses on inclusion, right, would allow students to really be able to express their individual beliefs and come up with arguments that are based on their gifting. Wow. So once they graduate, they're not now having to relearn how to do that because that's what you have to do in law school. When you're taking the bar, it's standardized tests. So you have to learn how to think like the person that wrote the test to answer the questions the way that they want you to write it. They're not looking for free thought. They're not looking for creativity. They're not looking for ingenuity. They're looking for a standard answer based upon someone else's experience. So what you've just said is phenomenal in terms of how we need to even begin to train students educationally, because you're right, we don't give people that space. And if you talk to any African American attorney or any attorney, really, the headache of the bar exam is you're being forced to think like someone else. And therefore you're not being applauded for that free discourse. So thank you for that, because that is phenomenal. Dr. Robinson, what do you say about
Well, I'm going to take it from a different perspective, because when I look at that, I tend to look at the leaders. Okay, because the leaders set a certain standard, and it may be, this way at church, it could be this way at the job, it could be any way. But people are looking at leaders and they're going to take the direction from leaders. And if I'm used to going into a meeting all the time and, they'll send you a note and say, this is what we want to discuss in the meeting and this is the outcome that we're looking for. But yet you get in the meeting and you start to give your opinion, then they start slapping down your opinion because they already have their mind set up, already have their mind set up. And so when you go in this meeting, everybody's sitting around the table like, oh, this is just a waste of time. Why are we in this meeting? Why did they even call this meeting? Because they already know what they want to do. So what you end up doing is stifling the people in the area.
That's right.
So remember, communication is the critical part of anything.
Yes.
It sets the environment, so the people feel engaged. They feel free to share their ideas. And, and once you get away from that, you sort of lose, you lose the creativity within the people in the group. So they just sit back and they don't say anything. And especially if you have a diverse group of people from all areas, because if you really want to see a project flourish, you need to have everyone's input.
That's right.
You need to have everybody's input in order for something to, to manifest.
That's right.
Once you get that, you're going to sit there and get what you always get.
That's right.
Always gotten. And so, what I try to do when I'm in a meeting is that and I've sat in plenty of meetings where I even get phone calls where I'm sitting on the phone and they're saying this, that, or the other. And then I go to give my opinion and it was like, well, no, I think we should do it this way. And then by the time the conversation is over, I really want to say, well, why did you
have me here?
Yes. You know, because my thing is to do something different.
Yes.
You know, it's not working for us this way. So let's try something else. You know, at least say, well, what are your ideas?
Correct.
So the last meeting that I had, and they wanted to have it specifically with me. And I said, well, no, I think we need to get it was a Zoom call. I said, I think we need to get the whole group on the call. We need to get everybody's input and everybody's ideas. And by the time we were done with that, oh, I love that. I love that. But it was like, you have to position it so, you know, you open up their minds. You know, you have to open up their minds and you've got to shift their minds the way they think. Because what people fail to realize is your beliefs drives your behaviors that's going to create what we're in today. And that's what we have going on today in the country. It's like everybody has a belief, you know, and this is what they think, and this is the way it's supposed to be, and this is the way it's supposed to go. But what you need to realize is what's going on out there is what's going to end up in here. That's why you're going to get the responses that you get.
Really good.
That's good. That's good. So, Dr. Harper, what are your thoughts in terms of inclusion?
I think it's actually a vicious circle. And we all suffer from know your place syndrome. And why? I'm just saying, because again, the family teaches you to know your place. Then, as Dr. Rivers spoke, you go into school and then you are reinforced of your place. And then you go to the corporate world and you're then really reinforced in your place. And so this is what happens. And then, you know, when you look at who we are today, we're civility ambassadors because we think differently. So if you notice what Dr. Robinson said, why did you even ask me to the table? All of us nodded. We're like, oh, how many times have I been in this situation? And it's like, and I have been reprimanded, like, know your place. Like, where you come different. And this is where we are breaking that. We're like, we know our place. We're world leaders in civility. So don't knock us.
Yes.
Right. And I'm going to be vulnerable now and speak that it took a year for Dr. Rivers to work on my confidence. It took 1 year.
No one would know.
No one would know. No, I'm serious. Remember, Doctor, it took me 6 months to even call myself Dr. Harper because I knew my place. I have family members who went to McGill University who are, you know, the PhDs, and they're like, when I got my doctorate, they're like, know your place. And I had to fight that know your place.
Right.
I earned my doctorate. I earned it of 25 years.
Come on.
Of fighting knowing my place.
Wow.
And this is what we need to do. And as Dr. Robinson said, I mean, and when you go to the corporate side and you were saying people are afraid and the inclusion and diversity, we don't even accept our family situations in corporate. So when I do workshops on family civility, the corporate responsibility for family civility, the first thing I say is, okay, you need to change sick leave to family leave. Number one. You have to have family feel proud, a single mother feel proud to go to their boss and say, hey, my kid needs me today. I am taking my leave. Instead of saying, which is worse, portraying and implementing the sick role to say, I have a headache, I have a stomachache, I have to take off work. First, you're teaching the person to lie. And then they feel so bad about lying, they actually get the headache or the stomachache, and then they can't even teach their family. You know what I mean? So one of the things of corporate family civility is accepting, hey, I have single mothers, I have single fathers, I have employees that need to take time for my family because our children are worth it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
they are
absolutely.
worth my mommy and my daddy or my grandma or my godmommy. They took the time from work to be with me because I needed them. Therefore, I am worthy.
Wow. Wow. And instilling that, right? Instilling that globally, having conversations, constantly letting people know. That's why civility for all is so critical. Dr.
And it costs
Singh,
nothing.
yes,
It costs nothing. You already have the CPA there. It's too.
Yes, yes.
So just switch it.
Yes, yes. And you get more value, right? You get more value out of the people that are working for you if you treat them with civility. This is a concept of civility that should be ingrained right in our system. We shouldn't have to fight for it. Having, like you said, to fight for it then creates a discourse. It creates a lack of comfort. It creates people that then become sick because they're not taking the time that they need to attend to the things that they need to attend to as a human being. That's a civil response.
$32.8 billion is actually the cost of absenteeism, where the family member, the parent, is at work, but they're so guilty of what they're missing at home, and they're not actually working. They're just there.
That's a good point.
Right. That's a great point. That's a great point.
And I did the research because, I mean, I'm not, as I said, I'm not good. It's a 2-day workshop, but, you know, it's $2.8 billion being wasted on absenteeism, or as I call it, presenteeism. You're present, but you're not really present.
You're not there. Wow. Wow. So, Dr. Busingye, for inclusion, just from a global perspective.
So I'm just thinking about the conversation that has been going on, and it's mainly based on the individual and how the individual fits into the community, and how that community either receives that individual, includes them, excludes that individual. So what about if we thought about humanity, civility, for example?
It's really good, Patrick.
From my African perspective, and according to African philosophy, one of the key things from one of the books, James Mbiti is one of the Kenyan philosophers, he said in his book, he says African philosophy is based on the view of philosophy of the human person, anthropology, is that I am because you are. Since you are, therefore I am. So I cannot be human by myself. We're human together. And that's what Desmond Tutu talks about in his book, No Peace Without Forgiveness, is it? No future without forgiveness. He says we belong to a band of life. So if we start thinking about us here as a human community, or humanity civility, then things could change, because if one part of that humanity is paining, then the whole humanity is paining.
Yes.
That part of that humanity is cut off.
Yes.
Some part is missing. We're not human because we're missing something.
Right.
And that's why in Africa we come to with the concept of what is about this
can't hear you. I hear something.
The recognition that we cannot exist by ourselves, that we exist together. Well, let me just read this important quote from Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa, Nobel Peace Prize winner. He says, "A person with Ubuntu is open and available to others, affirming of others, does not feel threatened that others are able and good, for he or she has a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs in a greater who is diminished when others are humiliated or diminished, when others are tortured or oppressed, or treated as if they were less than who they are." And that's what the conversation we've been about. So what we're lacking is the humanity civility.
Yes.
The Ubuntu that we end up excluding some others from the table of humanity.
That's right.
We include others because we are based on the individual criteria, or criterion which we've set ourselves. Okay, this one can be included, it can be excluded. This is human. This is less human. This is able. This one is disabled. and that continues and continues. So I think we have to think about globally, how can we work together as human beings? And you can start coming up with the coronavirus vaccine being discovered in different places. Some countries are saying, oh, we have to first treat our nationals. We can't export it yet to other countries until we've vaccinated all our people on this continent. What is that? If it's available, then make it for everyone.
Make it available for everybody. Right.
Care about the whole humanity, because as Sir Rivers keeps saying, it's just one virus which started off somewhere in Wuhan in China, and now it has locked down the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
So that means the whole world is ailing, the whole humanity is ailing, the whole humanity is healing, not just some nations who can afford, and those who can't, then they can perish.
That's right.
So we need to learn, as Martin Luther King said, we have to learn to live together as brothers.
Yes.
We'll perish together as foes.
So good.
That's right.
We're back to where you think you vaccinated everyone and someone be affected in one way or another.
That's right. That's right. That is so profound. And just the concept of humanity, civility is something that. It's another thing to work on, Dr.
My God, trust me, I'm on it.
It's gonna be a chapter in my book. I'll give you credit, as the preacher say, Dr. Patrick. I'll give you credit for it. But it is if we would begin to think of everything we do as a humanitarian response, as opposed to an individual response, which really, again, when I heard you, Dr. Rivers, talk about, it's not diversity and inclusion, it's just inclusion, right? If we think about it, humanity, we think of the whole being, right? So even though God created us with different gifts and talents, we are man, we are woman, we are human beings, we are his children, right? And so we all have the same status to God. There's no one big I or little you. We are one human being that God credits, and that God loves, and that God represents, and that God gifts, and that God keeps, and that God covers, and that God saves, and that God protects, regardless of what we look like or how we think. It has been years of the whole issue of diversity and fragmenting and class and systems that has caused this fracture, and then promotes incivility, because I then believe I'm more of a human being, as you've kind of suggested, Dr. Patrick, than someone else, whether it's because of the color of my skin, whether it's because of my gender, whether it's because of the money that I make, whether it's because of the type of job that I have. All of a sudden, I'm more of a human being. So I have a right to be uncivil to you because I think of myself differently. And really the system of diversity, while at one point it really did work to our advantage, I think it is now working against us in that conversation of inclusion and civility, because what I look like or how I think or how I communicate should not control whether or not you are civil or uncivil to me, which is that whole, which is one of the reasons why I'm writing this book about emotional civility. Because if we take all of these concepts that you've talked about, even the example that you gave, Dr. Robinson, in the workplace or in the corporate workplace or the family or on the global platform, and I don't agree in the boardroom with you. So we have the team together, but I don't agree. I should be able to say that I don't agree, right? Without you downing me for my disagreement, for my thought, right? And my thought is upon who God made me. So when Dr. Rivers and I were talking about the whole concept of emotional civility, the reason why people are in jail, the reason why people are divorced, the reason why people are abused is because they get that feeling, and then based upon that feeling that hits them, before they act on it, they don't make that choice of civility, right? They don't make that choice to go off the lane of aggression and fear and abuse and and anything else that's negative and uncivil, they make a choice based on a feeling to do something that is against what civil discourse means and what certainly God intended us to do. And diversity in essence, at this point, I think in our humanity, in our system, has caused a divide that then dictates a negative response as opposed to a positive response. And so these concepts of humanity that we're talking about and looking at us as one body, right, under God, right? The Bible says that we're one body with, with many giftings, right? So, but you can't, the body doesn't work without the eye, the body doesn't work without the hand. We are more functional when we all contribute all of our gifts and talents. But we don't hear the eye, even though the eye can't talk, right? The eye's not cursing out the mouth because the mouth is doing what the mouth is doing, right? It depends upon the mouth to articulate what it sees. And both hands use one another. But for some reason, again, globally, certainly nationally, we have gotten to a point, and we've been there for a long time, where we are intolerant of people's diverse issues or thought process, and instead of looking at as human issues and looking at us all as human beings with different thoughts based on different experiences, I am judging you by what you regarding what you say by my experience without giving credence to yours. And that is why I'm concerned. And I wanted to do this conference because are we facing civil war? How do we get America, the world, back on track to civility, to a civil discourse? It's okay that we don't agree. It's okay that we have a Republican Party and a Democratic Party and a Tea Party and an Independent Party. It's okay. It's okay that we have different religions. It's okay that we have different denominations, but we should not be disrespectful. We should not be fighting because I don't agree like you. And if we are operating in democracy, which then means the majority rules, then if we have an election and the majority speaks, then we should not try to divide the country based upon the fact that the majority felt that for whatever reason, this president at this point is the best for our nation. And my concern right now with America is we are trying to, even though we are operating in a democracy, we have people saying that the popular vote didn't matter. We have the fake news, as we talked about, indicating that that the election was fraudulent when there's no evidence of it. And then we have what is really concerning to me, Republicans, senators, politicians actually threatening physical violence because someone voted for a mask mandate or has a thought, right, that's different from what they believe. And so now it's not just I disagree with you. Now it's I disagree with you and I'm going to threaten your life. So why are we here? And then we'll end on how we can make a difference. But why do you think we're here now? So we've had some great conversations about family civility, corporate civility, global civility, and what it means, why civility matters. But how did we get here? And then we'll talk about some solutions that we can give our listeners. But how do you think we got here? I just want to read a couple of instances that I don't know, I'm sure most listeners have heard it, but there was a Kansas City GOP mayor that resigned because he was threatened over backing mask mandates. And so we're talking about politicians being threatened. We have House Democrats now invoking or wanting to evoke the Civil War Amendment that would prevent the 126 Republicans from being seated in Congress because they signed on to the litigation that went up to the Supreme Court indicating that there was an error or fraud in the presidential elections. And that amendment says that no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or any other state, having previously taken oath as a member of Congress, if they engage in insurrection, of rebellion against the same. And so there has been some very, very, very dramatic instances most recently. So how did we get here all of a sudden? Now we've talked about that foundation of civility. How do you think we got here in the United States? And then what can we do on our platforms of civility to make some change?
You know what I think happened? I think it's actually never really changed. It's just been masked. I think many times people think change, but the actual mind of the people haven't changed.
That's a good point.
I can let you in, but I still think you're not good. And I think what happens is many times the institutions, that's why if you work with me, what do I tell you? We have to create the knowledge and own it. Because what happens when the institution that creates the actual bar, they can change it. They can change the bar. So what they do, the one that creates it, keep changing it. So they went from slavery to Jim Crow to the new Jim Crow. So the institution can keep changing the actual marker. So what I think happened is this: 2020 gave us clear vision. 2020 was perfect vision. We saw everything clearly for what it is, and the people said, no, we're done. So now you have to deal with an actual generation that thinks different than what the older generation thinks. And you know what? And they're not going to have it any other way. That's right. So what I think our solution is this, is everything in life is process. We see people have been taught perfection, but everything is really process. So if we can educate the world that the way out of this is through process with everyone included, every voice heard in part of the process, because nothing is perfect that will stay that way. It'll change as the processes change.
That's
we need to engage in a new dialogue that includes everyone and says, okay, so in my book, When Histories Collides, I wrote a concept. I don't look for the end in mind. I look for the next step we can take together.
That's good.
See, the end in mind is too far sometimes. I can't see the end, but I can see the next step when I talk to Dr. Harper. I can see the next step when I talk to Dr. Basinge. I can see the next step. So I think we have to come down to what's the next step we can agree on to make together. And then if we can do that every day, man, we'll go far.
Wow. And that's why what you're doing is so important. And I'm sorry, I was looking down. I'm trying to get Dr. Sonia back in because she's in the broadcast, waiting to get back in her. I was going to say her internet as she dropped out. So she's in the broadcast. If Gerard or Kayla is listening, please let her back into the show. But what is so phenomenal about what you're doing, Dr. Rivers, and what we're so appreciative of is exactly what you said. So it's hard to take that one big bite, but as you said, if you look at it as a process, and what you've done and really God has done through you is evaluated, and totally God, right? Totally the anointing that's on your life, to identify in individuals that gifting that brings that piece of the puzzle. And then if we all operate in those giftings and we all take those steps, we then can move the narrative. We then can move the needle. We then can come up with solution. But you're right. If we try to look at it as a be all to end all, then that's almost impossible to tackle, right? Because as you said, this isn't anything new, right? This really isn't anything new. What it's done is just exposed, it's unmasked, it's just highlighted something that's always been there. But that doesn't mean that it has to always be there. And that's why we're here tonight, right? That's why we've committed to do what we're doing in the space that God has placed us. And so I agree. And I believe that you're absolutely right. Dr. Harper, what do you think?
No, I agree. I think God has finally said to open the doors. He's come back, and, we can interpret scriptures however we want. But I think what has happened is technology has allowed everybody to have a voice. Mm-hmm. We all now have opportunities where we are no longer being sheltered. We all have a voice. We have through social media, and that is the positive of technology. Yes. We can say about the negative being overloaded with opinions, but I think what you're saying tonight is that it's allowing everybody to have their opinion. And we are having this discourse, like you are saying, where I accept your opinion, and we have these talks on social media. Sometimes it gets terrible, but you can also delete the comment. Right. Sometimes it becomes uncivil. Mm-hmm. We have that opportunity to say delete, whereas if we're in each other's face, it's very hard to de-escalate an uncivil situation, whereas here it is easier. But to go back to the initial question about solution, and you speak about the law and justice, I want to work with you, Dr. Anderson, because divorce and the winning and losing of family separation is a big issue. It is. It literally sends the tone of every family. It's almost like you're being punished for not being a nuclear family. That's how it feels. I've been through it, and I feel I got punished because I had to separate and divorce. And exactly, and we all have the conversation, and this is going back to another conversation, Dr.
And don't be in the Black church and be a preacher. Then it's even. I feel you. Yes.
And one of the things that I'm trying to advocate for is that family civility workers can go into a home and do 6 weeks of supportive counseling, and the family come together and decide how this separation is going to happen. Yeah. And there's so many options. One of the options I love, and I'm not promoting, like, I just love it personally. Yeah. Right. Where the kids keep the home and the parents move out. And then every week the parents pack up and move in with the children. So they have that ability, and we're the ones who pack the bags.
Got it.
And when I heard that, it resonated with me because, when we first started, it was like my poor kids would forget their blanket that they needed to sleep, or they forgot a book. And when they go to school, because they don't have the right uniform, because I'm coming from Jamaica, we had uniform. And if you didn't have the right uniform, or if you didn't have, we mixed days were like uniform, and then you had a PE uniform. And if you got the D wrong and you had to wear your uniform and not your PE uniform, it was telling everybody, hey, my parents are divorced, and you're being punished because you're wearing the wrong uniform.
Right. That's right.
And so again, we have to look at the diversity of family and accept all family types.
Yes.
And be able to have the beginning of a judicial system, not the white male nuclear family system, right? But
that's right.
A system that we can all come together and say, how can we work as a group?
Yes.
To ensure that every member of the family is acknowledged.
Yes.
Their strengths are seen, and we able to make this work, because parents do not get along. It's just
it happens, right? It happens, and even have a brief story, which just always breaks my heart. It was a client, no longer representing him because I was also in the church. So as pastor attorney, it was a kind of a conflict of interest. So I thought I was better serving him as the pastor as opposed to the counsel. But he was separated. Child was born with a lot of special needs because the mother was addicted to drugs. And he ended up losing his child. He lost his apartment because he was at the hospital all the time with the child and couldn't work. And so because he was homeless, sleeping in the car, he lost the child. A white family ended up adopting or was the emergency foster family for the child. And instead of them empowering him to be the father and the mother to get off drugs, to be the mother, even though reunification in the system is a goal, again, talking about inclusion and diversity, right? And civility, they're still in court trying to, now the child's 5, and trying to come up with a solution where the child can permanently live with the white family. And as the pastor, I keep telling him the one thing that this child will always know, because he's been visiting, he calls him dad. I said, when he's 15, he's going to wonder why they took you. And if the answer is because you were sleeping in your car, then the question is, why didn't they give him a car? You know, why didn't they get a job? Why didn't they give him housing so that he could live with his child, as opposed to promoting separation? And it caused some very uncivil moments. So when you're dealing with those issues in the family, whether it's divorce, whether it's something like that, it ends up with incivility and right? Because you're dealing with hurt, and you're dealing with pain, and you're dealing with frustration, and you're dealing with fear, and no one's answering those questions, right? No one is addressing those emotions. Hence my book, right? Emotional Civility. We're telling you to stuff it. We're telling you to disregard it. We're telling you not to, as Dr. Patrick said, be human. We're telling you to be something that you're not. And the response when you're told to be inhuman, when you're told to act in a way that we as human beings created by God are supposed to act, is the result is instability. The result is instability.
There's no civility in divorce. There's none. We need to bring civility into the family courts.
Yes, I agree.
And a judge cannot decide on. And I have immense stories of my own personal experience, and it was in Jamaica, and this is where you're coming from. And then worse yet, things change in your life. So your children grow and it evolve, and you have to find money to hire a lawyer, to go back to court, to ask the spouse to say, okay, things have changed, because that's how the system is set up. I'm making money off of you. Again, you're being punished and being shown incivility because you don't want to be a nuclear family.
That's right. That's right. And it's true. And so as we're looking at civility in the corporate world, and then looking at civility as a global platform, and looking at community civility and even political civility, what you just said, we as a family make up that population, right? That community. Yeah. And so if we're frustrated and dealing with incivility in this realm of our life, right, or this corner of our life, then when we come into a situation like the boardroom, when we come into a situation with a global conversation, then we're going to interact in an uncivil manner because of the foundation that's lacking, right?
We have complete incivility towards different types of family.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's actually systemic.
It is.
It's systemic racism
yes.
to any family who's not a nuclear family.
Yes, yes. And so the challenge for me, and then Dr. Sonia, I'd like you to speak to it, but the challenge for me, again, and the reason why I'm writing this book is because we are human beings, right? And so we have emotions, and we do act on emotions, and even in the space of emotional intelligence, the the components and the hallmarks are self-awareness, self-regulation, social skills, empathy. It's understanding that you have emotions, and when you come into a situation, you bring all of you with you. And then, so the goal is regulating it, right? The goal is making sure that your response is appropriate. And so what I've seen, and the reason why I fear, if we are going back to a civil war, is because our emotions are on, red alert, and we are acting out emotionally as opposed to as thoughtful human beings, making decisions that reflect the morals and the values that God has given us. And so, and it happens in the corporate world, and our lack of communication and ability to handle these emotions, whether it's because of a family situation, or whether it's because of what's going on professionally, oftentimes that leads to this incivil or uncivil discourse. So, Dr. Robinson, what would you say? Are we facing civil war based on your expertise, and what would be some of the solutions that you see?
I don't think we're heading towards civil war. I think we need to lean in and confront it now before it get any worse than what it is. I mean, we have to keep that open and honest dialogue going. And sometimes we do have bad days where, what we're thinking is going to come out. But you have to control that. You need to learn how to control your thoughts. You need to learn how to control your mouth.
That's right.
The things that you say in a heat of passion can't be back.
That's right.
So that's one thing that we need to control. And sometimes if I find myself in a situation, I just don't say anything.
Right.
Give me a minute, or let me excuse myself and go take a deep breath, or whatever it is that I need to do at that point in time. Because what you don't want to happen is to go into a meeting and you just go off.
That's right.
At that point, you've lost all the respect and trust.
That's right.
You've lost, it's like you want to walk out of there on common ground, as Dr. Rivers said, common ground. You don't want to, you want to leave there as a friend, more so on a win-win basis.
Yes.
You don't want to go in there and have them think, oh, she's just flippity and, whatever. She's just trying to get her point across. She's not interested in trying to make it work. You get all the negative things. So when you go into, a situation, you always have to be calm about it, no matter how you may feel.
Very good.
You just got to put on that face. You got to put on that face. And things are going to get hard. They're not going to always be easy. It's just like, if you look at what's going on in this world today, I get so frustrated when I sit here and I listen to this. And then when I go to places, and people are talking about, I went to the chiropractor, my friend and I, we fell out. And why did you fall out? Well, because I put this on Facebook and her position was this, and my position was that. And I says, oh, okay. Well, did you, have a conversation with her to see why she feels the way she does, and how I explain to her why you feel the way that you do? I mean, you need to talk through your issues. That may be the best friend in your life that you'll ever have. Don't fall out over something that's here today and gone tomorrow.
It's really good.
That's right.
That's what that's going to be. And I sit here and I just look at this. I just look at this every day, and I'm like, if we don't get this under control, we will head to a civil war. But now is the time to lean in and confront the issue. We need to have dialogue that matters. We need to treat everybody with civility and respect.
That's right.
And in order to get to the next level, that's what we're going to have to do. And sometimes, if you look at the president, here's my position on that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a leader needs to remove himself. He needs to remove himself and allow the problem solvers to come in and go, go through the conversations, the directions, or whatever it may be, because they may not be the perfect person. They may not have all the knowledge and expertise as everyone else in the room. So you don't expect one person to know everything. My thing is, I don't need to know everything. I just need to know where to go to get the information.
That's right.
That means bringing a different person. That's what I'm willing to do.
Very good.
We need to be able to understand. We need to be able to hear and listen. And hearing and listening is two different things. You may hear what I'm saying.
Right.
But you're not listening to what I'm saying. And I'm not asking you this question to repeat what I said. I just want you to listen to me and, be engaged in the conversation.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that you're going to work through your issue.
That's right.
engaged.
Be engaged. Be engaged. Listen.
Value the person.
Bite your tongue.
That's
Right.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
sometimes you're going to have to do that, but you need to learn how to do that.
That's it. And those are the hallmarks of civility. And in writing my book, Emotional Civility, those are the hallmarks. It's what I'm teaching people in all aspects of their profession. Oftentimes we fight to be right.
Right.
We fight to have a voice. We fight to want to be in the room. Fight to be heard, and sometimes we don't listen. And we think we have all the answers, and we don't. And those again are the ground rules for the making of uncivil discourse, because we're not listening, we're not patient, we're not tolerant, we're not kind, we're not taking the time to understand someone else's perspective. And now, if we're acting like that, that's now playing out in a global setting. So the book, Emotional Civility, the new standard for global success, means that we take these values and morals and communication styles and skills, and we practice them as individuals. We practice them in the family. We practice them in the corporate setting. And so when we stand up in the political arena, in the global stage, we're all operating from that platform of respect, of tolerance, of inclusion, as opposed to I'm the right one, you're the wrong one, you don't understand me, and now I want to fight. And the concern is that's where we're headed. But I love that everyone is saying we might be kind of there, but it's not too late.
Right. And the other thing you want to remember is, how is it coming across to people from different countries? When they see,
so that's what I was about to ask Dr. That would be right on. We're right here.
At one point in time,
the
U.S. may have been the premier, but the U.S. is no longer there.
So talk to us, Dr. Patrick, because you and I.
So sometimes you just need to walk away from there, because right now what we're trying to do is come together as one.
Yes.
And the other thing that we need to think about as we talk through that issue is that, sometimes you can just watch a person's body language to tell where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
Whether if they're really engaged as to what you're saying.
Right.
Because you may have to say it or come at them a different way. So all those things you need to watch when you're dealing with, civil matters and, conversations. Just to keep people engaged and wanting to work with you.
Absolutely.
You know what, Dr. Ashton, there's a book that I want us to all five of us next year. I want to do a book called No Fault Collaboration.
All right.
And I want to explain what it is briefly, just a minute.
Yes.
No fault means, your truth is your truth. It's not your fault. Let's dialogue without having the emotion of right and wrong.
That's right.
Let's look at the situation. No fault collaboration.
I love it.
I love it.
I'm in. Yes.
I'm in.
Yes.
So, Dr. Patrick, how are we looking on the world stage? I'm gonna come back to that, because that's how we're gonna end. Dr. Rivers, No Fault Collaboration, book coming out 2021.
2021.
Yes, but how are we being perceived as a nation on the world stage? And one thing, again, in preparing for today, I read something that really was riveting to me. There was a doctor, she was a psychologist out of South Africa, Dr. Madikizela, and they were asking her, what could America learn from South Africa as it related to truth and reconciliation and healing from diversity? And who would ever think that we would look to South Africa in America to talk about how we heal from divisiveness? So how is America looking on the world stage? And for those of us who's watching, what can you tell us about how we should begin to incorporate some of what the world has experienced before, so that we're moving towards healing and reconciliation, as opposed to, again, moving to separation and divisiveness?
Thanks so much for asking that question. I remember watching some of these news channels, especially during the Black Lives Matter protests and riots, and some of them would realize that as it was being reported, that people are paid to go and destroy their own community hospital, destroy their own community police station, destroy their own community hall. So I think there's a need to think about what matters in the community and how to rediscover what to live in a human community. Because one of the things that has happened maybe during that time is that some people have lost a sense of community and community life. So it's all about, possibly all about self-protection. What is in it for me? What is in it for me rather than what is in it for us? This reminds me of that story. Some of you might have, of course, most of you, I think you do read the Bible. There's one of those in the Good Samaritan story, whereby you have those people who are following the law, they're passing, they're not touching that man who's injured or has been beaten up and robbed, but the Samaritan stops. And one of the key things the Samaritan is asking, is not asking the other people who are just passing by, they're asking the question, what will happen to me if I stop and help that person? What will happen to me is I'm breaking the law. I'm going against the religious practices, the tradition, the culture that I'm living in. But I can ask the question, what will happen to him if I don't stop and help him? So there needs to be that kind of shift, which comes down to being what he'll call selfless service. The Samaritan is stopping to offer selfless service. In spite of what is going to happen to him, he doesn't really consider himself because he's selfless. He's focusing on the other. And the way he sees selfless service, in order for someone to be a selfless servant, he has to practice certain attitudes. And I think this is what we need globally in order to move to a more civil society, which is all focusing on serving each other within the community, the societies, which is being attentive to the needs in our communities, being attentive to the needs in our families, being attentive to the needs to the issues that the media is bringing about. But as we are attentive, we're trying to analyze with our intelligence, we're being intelligent. How are we analyzing what's happening to us? Because some of it could be real news, some could be fake news. Some of the issues in the community could be real issues which are really affecting many in the community, but someone could be just individualized issues, and that person, because they have the power, they have the money, they blow just the individual issue, and then comes a community problem, and then it leads civil war in a way, because it's just an individual issue, but someone can sponsor that individual issue to escalate into a big issue in the community. Then being reasonable as we find the answers to the issues we are faced with. And once we find the answers, then we have to be responsible and implement those answers in those communities. So on that note, those beatitudes, I call them beatitudes of greatness. Be attentive, be intelligent, be reasonable, be responsible. Using your mind. So in order to transform a community, we need to be able to listen with our minds as well with our hearts. And that's why we come to the level of being a person of virtue.
Amen.
That's
Being
good.
a person who's loving.
Absolutely.
You love with your heart.
Yes.
And importantly, being hopeful. Because sometimes you can say you can use a bit of reason to hope, but you really need the heart to be hopeful. Where your mind stops, then your heart kicks in and gives you hope and the courage to overcome the situation. So as I end this presentation, in a way, I'm just asking, maybe each one of us may be asking the same question, or the people who are going to change the world, you're looking at the models that we have there. So who is the Mandela in me? Who is the Martin Luther King in me? Who is the Mahatma Gandhi in me?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dr.
Yes.
Anderson, I can answer that. That's great, Patrick, man.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson, I've been talking to some international people about the effects of the American election.
Yes.
And what I think has happened is many of the leaders have followed America as a leader. So now many countries are dying because the actual leaders have taken the mask as a political thing, and in some countries they aren't wearing the mask and people are dying because
Right.
of examples. So the actual imagery of it of America has impacted everything. It's impacted the entire world. So
Yes.
so this leadership and what it does in this country, other countries watch and they do
That's
whatever
right.
whatever our leaders do. So I was a gentleman last night, and he says it's caused a lot of division in their political race in
Yeah.
their country because one guy's wearing a mask, one guy's not, and they've actually politicized the mask, and now people are dying in some countries.
Right. So the politicalization of these issues is killing people, right?
Yeah,
And it
yes.
really does go back to what Dr. Busingye just said, and I'm so grateful for that. It really all comes back to who God made us to be,
Yes.
and what God has called us to do.
Yes.
And we are servants. And when we do look at any issue from a platform of servanthood, then we will naturally and organically communicate civilly.
Right.
When we begin to operate from a platform of individuality, of selfishness, we then begin to look for a divisive answer to simple questions, which if we lead with our heart as opposed to our mind, and if we're leading with a sense of service, we will not experience that fragmentation, that divisiveness, that incivility that we are experiencing now, certainly in America, and that we've seen in different countries, obviously for hundreds of years globally. And so are we headed for civil war? I hope not. I hope not. I believe that with a Dr. Clyde Rivers, with a Dr. Rebecca Harper, with a Dr. Patrick Busingye, and with a Dr. Sonia Robinson, and with everybody that's part of the civility movement as just spearheaded by Dr. Rivers, we can change the world. And I'm so honored to be a part of this great community that you started, Dr. Rivers. And I do believe, and I hope that this conversation has touched the listeners to really begin to think about civility as an issue individually, as an issue as a family member, as an issue in business world and corporate world, as an issue as a global leader, and certainly as a movement for us to ensure that we do not head to civil war. So if we're headed there, we as global leaders, we as individuals with the hearts of God can change it, because with God, all things are possible. So I thank you all. I think this was a great discussion. We know that we all could be here forever and ever and ever and just talk. There's never enough time. But I do thank you all for participating, and I hope that we answered the questions. We did give everyone some things to think about, and that's what Global Thought Leaders do. We make you think, and I think that everyone that listened really should go back and think about, how are you communicating in your family? How are you communicating? Are you using some of those pearls of wisdoms that Dr. Robinson dropped in how we discourse among one another? On KCG Consulting Services website, I did develop a pledge of civility. So if you are a person in this world that wants to begin to take up this mantle of civility and be part of this movement, go to my website, Dr. Sharon at kcgllc.org. That's Dr. Sharon at kcgllc.org. That's my email. Website, www.kcgllc.org, www.kcgllc.org. The Civility Pledge is there. It's just a foundation. You guys can take it and run with it. But I would hope that we'd all pledge towards a more civil life.
Yes.
Civil discourse, civil in our interactions, any space in which we operate in. It says, I pledge to be courteous in behavior and speech. I pledge to communicate with respect, restraint, and responsibility. I pledge to use the skills of tolerance and listening and respect when asserting my views, even when someone does not agree with me. I pledge to use the skills of tolerance when asserting my views and pledge not to tear down the views of others, no matter how unpleasant or different they might seem. I pledge to use a civil tone of voice in all discourse. I pledge to use civil, nonverbal expressions and cues in all discourse. I pledge to refrain from cyberbullying and will use social media responsibly. I pledge to teach those in my family and who I come into contact with about the benefits of civil discourse. I pledge to have a respect for all points of view. I pledge that all persons I come into contact with will be given an opportunity to express opinions to me without attack. I pledge to model civil behavior in my daily life, and I pledge to uphold ethical standards and to hold myself and others accountable to this civility pledge. I hope that you agree that civility in our nation, in our world, is so needed now. There's so much violence and so much division and so much separation. But we on this line, as men and women of God, first and foremost, pray for you. We pray that in your life that you find a place of civility, peace like never before. We pray that you will begin to embrace and take up this mantle that we think are so important. And I do ask that you contact me if you're interested in learning more about Civility for All. Dr. Clyde Rivers is the founder of that movement. Dr. Rebecca Harper, if you're interested in family civility. Dr. Sonia Robinson, if you're interested in civility regarding business as well as communication, and Dr. Patrick Businge, who is in the United Kingdom and who is built on the foundation of his life, the University of Greatness, to make sure that greatness is brought out of you no matter what you're going through. So thanks for joining us. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope you enjoyed our time together. I certainly enjoyed being with all of my phenomenal guests. You all have a great night.